Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Here's what's making our headlines on the program today. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson makes a surprise visit to Kyiv. President Vladimir Putin says Russia is entering a new era and is beginning as a powerful and sovereign nation. And victims of the church attack in Owo, Ondo State, Nigeria, are laid to rest. But of course, we begin with the latest coming from Ukraine. And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in Kyiv this afternoon, making a second unannounced visit to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian capital during the Russian invasion. He'd been due to appear at a conference held by a group of his Tory MPs in Doncaster, but cancelled the visit to travel to Kyiv instead. The visit comes a day after leaders of 4 European nations visited the Ukrainian president and publicly backed Ukraine's bid for candidacy status to join the EU. The Prime Minister tweeted a picture of himself with the Ukrainian president with a message saying, "Mr. President Volodymyr, it is good to be in Kyiv again." In the meantime, Russian President Vladimir Putin says the country is entering an era that is beginning as a powerful sovereign nation, telling an economic conference in St. Petersburg, "We will definitely use the colossal opportunities provided by current times and will be even stronger," adding that it is obvious that the rules, the essence of the new order, will be set by strong sovereign states and that others are doomed to remain rightless colonies. He has implored Russian businesses to keep working in the country, explaining that there is huge potential in Russia, telling them it is safer in your own house, and those who didn't want to listen to this have lost millions abroad. During his speech, he said Russia will develop as an economy and will never stop along a path to isolation, despite the unprecedented sanctions imposed by the West following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. President Putin says Russia will keep dealing with Western companies and he hopes gas flows will increase via new routes, adding that Russia will continue to expand economic cooperation with those who want it. Talking about Russia's so-called special military operation, he says Russia's decision to start the operation was forced on the country. He said it was aimed at protecting our people. His words, the people of Donbass in eastern Ukraine, as he repeats his unfounded accusation that they were being subjected to genocide. Well, at the same forum, President Putin's economy advisor, Maxim Oreshkin, described the U.S. currency, the dollar, as a drug, and that Russia is overcoming the difficult addiction. He says the whole world has come to realize that the dollar is a drug, not a blessing, and this realization is growing in the better part of the world. They wanted to isolate us, but they won't succeed. Russia will be an open economy. We have many partners, in his words. Speaking about the economy, Russia's ambassador to China, Andrei Denisyov, says politics and security cooperation between the 5 BRICS countries have become more important given the vulnerable global situation, calling on the 5 members to reduce their dependence on the US-dominated global payment system. He made the remarks in an interview with Chinese media ahead of the upcoming 14th BRICS summit holding on June 23rd. That event, under the theme Foster Global Development Partnership for the New Era to jointly implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, will be held via video link and attended by leaders of the BRICS countries and relevant emerging economies and developing countries.
Our expectations are great, and preparatory work gives us reasons to have high aspirations. Our main desire is how to withstand, how to resist that vulnerability, and how to mitigate the impact of the current situation on the development of national economies of our countries and the regional and global economy as a whole. This year we have convened quite a number of meetings together with international institutions like, for example, UN Office of Counterterrorism, which was very good, very helpful to the experts of BRICS countries how to deal with counterterrorism in global scale.
French President Emmanuel Macron says while France will do all it can to help Ukraine win its war with Russia, he will continue to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin whenever it is useful. The leaders of Germany, France and Italy, all criticized in the past by Kyiv for support viewed as too cautious, visited Ukraine on Thursday and have offered the hope of EU membership to a country pleading for weapons to fend off Russia's invasion. President Macron also said he saw little chance of an agreement with Russia for now to get grain out of the Ukrainian port of Odessa, but said there were talks to regenerate rail routes linking Odessa to the Danube River in Romania as an alternative. Ukraine's inability to use its major deep-sea port, Odessa, because of Russia's military incursion has led to a jump in global food prices and warnings by the United Nations of hunger in poorer countries that rely heavily on imported grain. Now, in what many described as a huge step towards full membership, the European Commission has proposed making Moldova an EU membership candidate. The Commission concluded that Moldova, which shares a long border with Ukraine, has reached a solid basis to further alignment with EU rules and regulations, according to the EU executive. Not only Georgia, though, but Ukraine is also up as for candidate membership of the European Union. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the applications are strong and countries have come together politically, although the setbacks have been criticized because of reforms in the EU.
Turning to Moldova, our assessment goes broadly into the same direction as for Ukraine. We therefore also recommend that Council grants Moldova the European perspective and candidate status, on the understanding that the country will carry out a number of further important reforms. In the recent past, Moldova has taken a decisive step towards reforms with a clear mandate from its citizens. It is on a real pro-reform, anti-corruption and European path for the first time since independence. Of course, Moldova still has a long way to go. Its economy and public administration in particular require major improvements, but provided that the country's leaders stay on course, we believe that the country has the potential to live up to the requirements. Georgia shares the same aspirations and potential as Ukraine and Moldova. Its application has strength, in particular, the market orientation of its economy with a strong private sector. To succeed, the country must now come together politically to design a clear path towards structural reform and the European Union, a path that concretely sets out the necessary reforms, brings on board civil society, and benefits from broad political support.
The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, now much earlier she had spoken about Ukraine and Ukrainian membership as a candidate membership of the European Union, which we'll hear in just a minute. And that's because there have been processes involved in this. Those four European leaders who met with the Ukrainian president yesterday did throw their support behind Ukraine's membership of the European Union. Joining me now is Foreign Affairs commentator Collins Weke. He's in Brussels. Collins, thank you again for being here. I know we spoke to you yesterday, but this is new. Yes, news of EU candidates membership for Ukraine. It may be considered good news, but many wonder whether this will not further stoke Russian aggression towards Ukraine.
Thank you, Marachi, for having me. We had Emmanuel Macron yesterday and today actually making some very, very important, statements in regards to the question you just posed. And why is it important to listen to Emmanuel Macron? It is important because he's been the one speaking to Vladimir Putin. He's the one that just returned from Ukraine and saw things by himself. And what he said is that the prospect of Russia allowing, export of food, particularly grain from Ukraine to the rest of the world to avert the impending hunger is far, far remote. And so he's exploring other, options. Now, if you, probe Macron further, he will be fair enough to tell you that Vladimir Putin is not in a hurry to stop the aggression in Ukraine. So, of course, it is easy for Putin to claim that he is further aggrieved by, Ukraine, leaning more and more towards Europe, and Europe not closing its door against Ukraine, and perhaps lean on that as an excuse to, continue his war. But it is simply what it is, which is an excuse. And so, this is one of the positive fallouts of the aggression. Well, positive depending on how you look at it, because the Russian war on Ukraine puts the entire future European order at risk. It is already forcing a fundamental, reconsideration of the EU's and its neighbors' interests. So, actually, the EU chief making this announcement prior to a summit taking place a week from today, next week, Friday, actually set the pace to admitting Ukraine into the EU fold as a candidate member. Whether Russia will accept that, of course, we all know that it's not going to be acceptable, but it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, and I can just imagine, what the Russians think. We do know what the Russians think. Of course, the Kremlin released a statement just after that. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov talked to reporters about this, and he said Russia is closely following Ukraine's efforts to become a member of the European Union, especially in light of, increased defense cooperation within the EU. He's talking about the weapons that are coming from the West. Now, going back to the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she said we have one clear message, and that is Ukraine deserves European perspective. Ukraine should be welcomed as a candidate country. This is the understanding. The good work has been done, but important work remains to be done. What does it mean to be in candidate membership of the European Union, and what benefits are there?
Yeah, what it essentially means is that their candidacy triggers negotiation to actually ascend into the fold as a full-fledged EU member. It is a long and tedious process that takes an average of 4 or 5 years. So the journey will only just officially start on Friday next week. Now, you also have to look at the Russian aggression as actually the main force behind the trigger, because initially when it was announced that Ukraine is going to, officially apply, anti-expansionist, EU leaders, for example, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, was like, wait a minute. Even Macron actually went a bit philosophical, not standing here nor there. But seeing what is unfolding in Ukraine through the Russian aggression, it became very clear to all of them that, the European order is at, more serious risk than it has ever been before. And it has actually brought the Europeans closer, extending the argument a bit to the other side, and that is NATO. You have also seen how this war has actually, solidified NATO even more, which is contrary to what, Putin had in mind. Now, what it offers Ukraine is greater protection, more economic advancement, and so on and so forth. But let's be very careful about this. All of these benefits are not going to fall due until they ascend to full-fledged membership. But in the interim, there are things like, visa-free arrangement as part of the, gradual integration process, they will make those benefits. And of course, when you have a free visa entry, into a country, it enhances indirectly economic development and so on and so forth. So there are many benefits there, not only for Ukraine, but also for Europe, that has that ambition to expand as much as possible, but to avert against, Russia and its aggression. Expansion eastward is something that they have now taken as a major foreign policy decision.
Yeah, and I want to focus on what President Putin said in his speech today at the Economic Forum. He said a lot of things, of course, extolling Russia's virtues, and speaking, repeating some of the rhetoric he said in the past, how Russia was pushed into this war and all of that. He talked about a new era for Russia, and also talks about how Russia beat all of the opposition from the West. Russia's still thriving. What do you make of that, and what do you think it means, by a new era for Russia?
It goes without saying that Russia has entered a new era. Now, whether he meant that to be a positive era, and of course, we can only suspect that that is what it means, but it is far from it. Russia has stepped into an era of isolationism because basically, up to 80% of the world is actually, supportive of the coalition for Ukraine. They may not be for a coalition against Russia, depending on, the national interests of the individual countries. But the point is that more and more, Russia is, is feeling more isolated, more desperate. You could, read that from the undertone of his statement. So yes, it is a new era, but that era is certainly not favorable for Russia. Sorry, I've forgotten the other bit of your question, Amarachi.
Well, it's, what you made of his speech generally. He talked, of course, about, all the advancements that Russia has made, the economic liberations and all of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the credit has to be given to Russia in terms of how they have actually tried to manage the barrage of sanctions that have come their way as a consequence of the invasion of Ukraine. I think the calculation in both Washington and Brussels was that before now, Russia would have crumbled, but they have stood their ground. That, however, doesn't mean that they are not cracking under the weight of the economic sanction, and of course the fact that a number of key countries that they expected will line up solidly behind them have actually either remained silent or, actually taken the side of the Western alliance. But yes, they have stood strong. Now, how long they will stand strong, considering the resolve by both Europe and the NATO alliance to support solidly Ukraine with weapons, economic development, and even planning already post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. So all of this put together makes you begin to doubt how long Russia can hold strong. And it will surprise any analyst if Vladimir Putin doesn't realize this. But, of course, he's been a brave guy by speaking out in the manner that he spoke.
And Russian propaganda is strong, isn't it? Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Collins. Appreciate your analysis on this. We'll be reaching out to you, of course, some more, because I know there will be developments to this story. Thanks again.
Always a pleasure. Cheers.
Well, coming up after the break. The UK's Home Secretary Priti Patel says the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the United States has been approved. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're looking around the world now. Protesters in India today set fire to train coaches as demonstrations against a new military recruitment process raged for a second day. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government announced this week an overhaul of the recruitment process for the 1.38 million strong armed forces, aiming to bring in more people on short, 4-year contracts to lower the average age of personnel. But many potential recruits object, saying they should be allowed to serve longer than 4 years. Hundreds of protesters torched train coaches in the eastern state of Bihar and the southern city of Secunderabad, causing widespread damages and disrupting rail services. A new recruitment system called Agnipath, or Path of Fire in Hindi, will bring in men and women between the ages of 17 and a half and 21 for a 4-year tenure at non-officer ranks, with only a quarter retained for longer periods. Opposition members of Mr. Modi's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party say the system will lead to more unemployment in a country already grappling with joblessness. Well, staying in India, heavy monsoon rains have caused rivers to overflow and roads to become inundated in the northeastern Assam state. Today, local media is reporting 16 people have died in Assam and neighboring Meghalaya state. Thousands of people have been displaced as the rains continue non-stop. They've been going on for 96 hours. Monsoon deluges are a yearly occurrence in Assam, resulting in flooding and landslide. Just in May, the Brahmaputra River, one of the largest rivers in the world, which flows from Tibet to India and finally into Bangladesh, burst its banks in Assam, inundating more than 1,800 villages in 26 districts and devastating parts of the railway network. We'll stay on with the weather for a while, but this time in France, where outdoor public events have been banned in an area of the country as a record-breaking heat wave sweeps across Europe. Concerts and large public gatherings have been called off in the Gironde department around Bordeaux. On Thursday, parts of France hit 40 degrees Celsius earlier in the year than ever before, with temperatures expected to peak on Saturday. Scientists say periods of intense heat are becoming more frequent and longer lasting as a result of global warming. Spain, Italy and the UK are also experiencing high temperatures. The French Interior Ministry has warned people to be extremely careful and not expose themselves to the weather. A state forecaster, Météo France, said it was the earliest hot spell ever to hit the country, which has been caused by a mass of hot air moving from North Africa. Temperatures could hit as high as 39 degrees Celsius in Paris, and droughts have also raised the risk of wildfires, according to forecasters. So we mentioned Britain, right? Temperatures are rising there as well. Many are headed for the sea and fretting about climate change today, as the temperatures hitting 34 degrees Celsius on UK's hottest day of the year so far. A spokesperson for the United Kingdom's Weather Service says today is likely to top Wednesday's 2022 record of 28.2 degrees Celsius, with 34 expected in some parts of the southeast. Brighton Beach on the south coast was filled with people looking to cool down away from the stifling heat in the capital. But it's not been all sunshine and rainbows for people in the heat, with climate change at the forefront of many people's minds. Many are talking about the temperatures boiling in London and saying something must change. Others saying they're enjoying it, and for the long term, they might have to sacrifice their comfort.
I mean, that is just mad. Like tomorrow's supposed to be thunderstorms, isn't it? You could never tell in this country. It could be 30 degrees today, 15 degrees next week. It is mad the way things are going, yeah.
I'm from Cyprus, and now in Cyprus it's raining, and I'm in London and I'm boiling here, so something must change. We need to take precautions about the climate change sooner than later, because undoubtedly it's worrying for all of us. Now we are enjoying it, but for long term, we might sacrifice.
Yeah, I think it's the first real summer, because we passed 2 years with the COVID. Now things will be better.
It's lovely. Yeah, people are spending money, but we're surprised how many people are on the beach now. They'll all spend money here, so it's good for the economy of Brighton, isn't it?
Well, here's one topic Britons love to talk about. So let's talk to Britain herself. Juliana Olayinka, our London correspondent, joins us now. Juliana, great to see you. And you look pretty chill. I mean, you're not out under, the exposed to the weather, but people complaining about how hot it is. So temperatures have been rising. What's it been like today?
Goodness me, Amarachi, I was looking at those images of the people flocking to Brighton Beach, and I've got to tell you, I'm a little bit jealous. The way I'm keeping cool right now is by trying to strip back some of the makeup. I've got a trusted bottle of water, which has been advised by the Met Office, and I'm sure the viewers can see my pretty crusty fan in the background. Nobody, unless you're a big corporate office, has air conditioning in the UK, because, of course, we don't really need it. You very rarely see temperatures like this on this pretty cold, chilly island. But for the third day in the row, temperatures have soared, and we have the hottest day of the year. I think earlier in the week, the Met Office said it could potentially reach 34 degrees. I think they checked, and the hottest temperature it's been is about 32.4 degrees in Heathrow. But this is still hotter than Jamaica, hotter than Santorini, and then hotter than even Portugal. So on the one hand, it's great. If you're somebody who's lucky enough to be working from home, then perhaps you would have been keeping yourself cool in Brighton. But many of us, of course, haven't been doing that. I was on the tube just a few minutes ago, and it was really, really empty, because temperatures on the tube had reached about 40 degrees. It was scorching hot. And there has been lots of advice, particularly for people that are in London, in the southeast and in the east of England, especially parents who are pushing their children in the pram. They're being advised not to go out between certain hours, I believe between 11 and 3 o'clock, when the sun is at the hottest. Again, to make sure you're drinking plenty of water. And if you're elderly, just to stay at home. And for anybody in the UK who is watching this programme, it is really important to make sure you're checking up on your elderly loved ones. We know that some people don't expect it to be really hot in Britain, so they do make sure they do always keep lots of layers on, but this is not the time to do that. We are expecting over the weekend for the weather to turn, and there are thunderstorms expected. If you're in the UK, you know that you always carry a jacket and you always carry an umbrella, because the temperature could change so rapidly. But it has been really hot. In fact, Amarachi, in South London, in Brixton, just a couple of hours ago, a bus caught fire. Now, we're not sure yet whether the fire brigade are going to deem this down to the hot weather, but that is just how scorching it is. So on the one hand, it's great. Everybody can joke about and have a dip in the sea. But we know that this country just isn't prepared for this type of weather. So you still have to take precautions.
Yeah, and it's good, that people have in mind that this could be attributed to climate change. I've heard some of the respondents there just earlier before we came to you, many of them talking about, how this, reminds them about how the climate is changing. I'm just wondering, if it's so hot, I don't think the water is cool enough, though. But what about the evenings? Is it cooler at night? We've heard about, summer rains, in the evenings, and perhaps the weather cooling off and temperatures dropping in the evenings. Is that the situation as well?
It does drop in the evenings, but I've got to tell you, at about 4 o'clock in the morning today, Amarachi, it was already about 18 degrees. And if you think that just a couple of weeks ago it was about 7 degrees for Brits, it's just completely sporadic. It's like you're going from one extreme to the other. I did actually hear a news correspondent saying, with a straight face, some advice to some people, which is to put your nightgown in the freezer for an hour before you go to sleep. And instead of having a hot water bottle, which we're used to having in the UK, that perhaps you should be having ice packs. There are some conditions and some guidelines that the Met are asking people to follow. But, there is some serious issues in this. You spoke about the extreme weather in the south of France and in Spain and in Italy, where we believe that this warm gust is coming from. And of course, there was a deadly incident in 2003 in a French nursing home where we know that hundreds of elderly individuals were killed. So there is a serious case for this, particularly if you're old, particularly if you have problems with your heart and you have pre-existing breathing issues, to take it really seriously. I believe 7,000 hectares of land across Spain has been burnt because there are wildfires picking up. The Met Office have also advised people not to be having barbecues, or if you are having a barbecue, just to make sure that conditions are in place for gusts of wind to not knock it over. Because, of course, if that happens, then a park can be set on fire. And I do believe that some buildings have been evacuated across certain parts of Europe. There's a really popular a theme park in southern Spain, and 3,500 people were told that they had to leave, and that caused a little bit of a stampede. And so I think, people are looking at this because, again, we talk about climate change. We know it's taking effect. It's been taking effect in certain parts in Africa, but of course it's taking an effect in certain parts of Europe too. And I believe that systems may have to be put in place, like having air conditioning in homes, air conditioning in the tubes, good, robust air conditioning in offices, so we learn to live in this new weather pattern.
Wow. And then climate change just comes and beats it all down. But let's look at, the impact on businesses. I'm sure that many are thriving, especially those that had been, affected by the pandemic, which had to close shop. I'm sure that a lot of them are thriving at this moment, especially those who sell drinks and, summer wares, I guess.
You're absolutely right. We are going through a cost of living crisis, but because we had pretty decent weather for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, that was double bank holiday weekend, wasn't it? So I believe about £100 million of extra spending boosted the London tourism industry. And you're absolutely right, Amarachi. People are flocking to the beaches, buying all of those goods that have been stocked up. You cannot get ice anywhere at the moment. And there are so many kind of like pop-up festivals in London. There's a huge campaign at the moment that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is boosting out, trying to get people to go back into London, trying to get people out. I told you that the tube that I was on just a few minutes ago was absolutely empty, but all of the gardens outside offices were full. I think people are really enjoying it, enjoying this a little bit of sun. This is the hottest June that we've seen on record. Are we going to be getting this kind of weather in July and August? I doubt it. It is a tiny island, very windy, very cold. But yes, I think the fact that people are going to be out and about spending, boosting retail sales, boosting the bottom line of the beleaguered hospitality industry, has got to be some food for thought and some good news after what has been a tumultuous week with some terrible, terrible, gloomy data from the Bank of England and other places.
Yeah, and I just saw, a dog, in the video just as you were speaking, and I just remembered how Britons and people around the world care for pets. What are they saying about, how to help them also cope with the terrible heat and the heat wave in London?
But that's a really good question, and I suspect that as the day cools down, we are going to get, unfortunately, some of these really horrible stories. I do remember we had a couple of pretty hot days in May, and there were reports of some police officials having to break in to windows because some people said, "All right, I'm going to leave the dog in the car whilst I pop into a Tesco or any other big retailer." Something you'd expect to do in a couple of minutes. If you reach a full line, it could take 15 minutes. So I know that the Met, as they have issued this Series 2 weather alert, are advising people, just don't do that. Do not leave your pets in the car. And most certainly do not leave your children in the car, especially if you're going to leave the children in the car with the windows up. That is just an absolute no. And also as well, Amarachi, a lot of first-time mothers that are going around with their prams and their buggies may be tempted to keep the hat on the baby and to keep the socks on. This is not a time to do that, especially because we know that it's really quite stuffy and quite humid in the UK. I do miss Lagos. We don't get that fresh breeze. I know, of course, it is extremely hot there and you don't get breeze all the time, but the freshness that you get from the Atlantic just doesn't exist here in the UK. When it's hot, it feels extremely choking.
Yeah, indeed. Nothing compares to the breeze in Lagos. I mean, we're having rising temperatures here as well. It's humid in Lagos, I must tell you. But thankfully, it's been raining over the past few days, so it's a bit cooler. Would be nice if you visited at this time to take, a break from the heat in London. Thanks again, Juliana.
Thank you, Samarati.
Well, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's extradition to the United States has been approved by UK Home Secretary Priti Patel. Mr. Assange has 14 days to appeal over the decision, according to the Home Office. Said the courts found extradition would not be incompatible with his human rights, and that when in the United States, he will be treated appropriately. Mr. Assange is wanted by the American authorities over documents leaked in 2010 and 2011, which the US says broke the law and endangered lives. The WikiLeaks documents related to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The Australian is being held at a Belmarsh prison in London after mounting a lengthy battle to avoid being extradited. Extradition allows one country to ask another to hand over a suspect to face trial. Responding to the Home Secretary's order, WikiLeaks confirmed it would appeal his decision or repeal her decision. Well, there have been reactions to this. WikiLeaks founder's wife, Stella Assange, says she would appeal Britain's decision to approve her husband's extradition to the US. Assange, as we said, is wanted by US authorities on 18 counts, including a spying charge related to WikiLeaks' release of vast troves of confidential US military records and diplomatic cables, which Washington says had put lives in danger. His supporters say his prosecution is a politically motivated assault on journalism and free speech because he's an anti-establishment hero victimized because he exposed US wrongdoing in conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq.
There's always a possibility that Priti Patel would approve sending Julian to the country that has plotted to assassinate him, to the country that Julian exposed the crimes of. And we're not at the end of the road here. We're going to fight this. We're going to use every appeal avenue. And we're going to fight. I'm going to spend every waking hour fighting for Julian until he's free, until justice is served. Well, it's very difficult to describe what it's like as a family. Our resolve is redoubled for every decision that is taken, which is a travesty. I mean, I have no words to express what it's like to see the UK process being used as a way to prolong Julian's suffering again and again. And they've been, there has been every opportunity to end Julian's suffering, to let him be free, because he has to be free. He should be free. Everyone knows it. Process is being used to hide atrocity, and we know that's from history, that can be done, and the UK should not be doing that. It should not be engaging in persecution on behalf of a foreign power that is out for revenge. That foreign power that committed crimes which Julian put into the sunlight specific concrete crimes that have not been prosecuted, that have been just shoved under the rug. And Julian, who has done nothing wrong, he has done everything that any self-respecting journalist should do when given evidence of a state committing crimes, of corruption. They publish it because their duty is to the public. And Julian's duty to the public has landed him in prison for already more than 3 years, and he faces 175 years.
Still ahead on the program. Germany's health minister says a COVID-19 vaccine able to impede infections could be available within the next 6 to 12 months. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. U.S. President Joe Biden says major economies must speed up climate change efforts and improve energy security. He's calling on other major economies to do this, asking them to collectively do this by cutting methane emissions, adopting ambitious targets for zero emissions vehicles, and cleaning up shipping. At a third virtual gathering of the Major Economies Forum under his presidency, Mr. Biden called on countries to spend $90 billion to speed commercialization of clean technologies and to develop new fertilizers that cut agricultural emissions and boost food security. A disabled passenger has died at Gatwick Airport after disembarking an aircraft without a helper. According to Gatwick, at the time, staff were helping 3 other passengers with restricted mobility disembark from the plane, and rather than wait for the staff to return, they decided to leave the EasyJet plane. The passenger fell while going up an escalator. According to a Gatwick spokesperson, he said EasyJet cabin crew were closest to the 82-year-old man, providing medical attention before the airport's medical staff arrived. Here in Nigeria, it's been a solemn day, especially in Owo, in Ondo State, as victims of the deadly attack on St. Francis Catholic Church are laid to rest in the town. The day started with a funeral mass held at a different location from the church premises, attended by family members, clergy, and state government officials. The state governor, Akeredolu, who was moved to tears, expressed sadness over the killings, noting that government has failed in securing the masses, and that the security architecture of Nigeria must be overhauled. He prayed for the repose of the souls of the departed, assuring that they will not die in vain. And following the service, families of the victims took the bodies home for private burial ceremonies.
After everything, I will carry my wife back to the mortuary there. You will stay there tomorrow. We'll convene to my hometown, Ebonyi State. Because after everything, we cannot go today again because of the time and how Nigeria be now. So we don't want to move in the night.
We're in North Africa now, in Morocco to be precise. King Mohammed VI has tested positive for COVID-19, but with no symptoms. And that's according to the monarch's personal doctor. The doctor said the monarch would be on a sick leave for a couple of days to recover. King Mohammed, who holds sweeping powers, has headed the Muslim world's longest-serving dynasty since 1999. COVID-19 infections had risen in the country in the past month, from a few dozen cases daily to 1,568 infections recorded in the previous 24 hours. Staying with health issues, UNICEF estimates that conflict, violence and other crimes have left a record 36.5 million children displaced from their homes at the end of 2021. That's the highest number recorded since the Second World War. The detailed work provides a blueprint for governments, academics, health professionals, civil society, and others with an ambition to support the world in transforming mental health. And in 2019, nearly 1 billion people, including 14% of the world's adolescents, were living with a mental disorder.
The key findings of the report are that we need to that countries need to transform
their actions for mental health. They need to deepen their value and commitment for mental health. They need to change the environments for mental health, and they need to improve mental health care. And this is based on this wide review, which found that mental disorders are extremely common. Almost 1 billion people in the world have a mental disorder. Most people do not have access to care. Less than a third of people with psychosis and less than a third people with depression have access to mental health care, and much of the care that is available is not adequate.
The timing of the report is related to some data that we collected last year, measuring how countries are progressing in their mental health systems in general. And despite the increased demand and interest generated by the pandemic, the reports show us that the progress was not that good as expected. So we thought that it was a time after nearly 20 years to put together the evidence that we have, the dimension of the problem, the alternatives that many countries are finding in order to progress and to do better, put that all together to increase, hopefully, the motivation, awareness also of stakeholders in general to advance in the field of mental health.
In the meantime, Germany's Health Minister Karl Lauterbach says a COVID-19 vaccine able to impede infections could be available within the next 6 to 12 months. The minister, who is also an epidemiologist, says he believes developing vaccines over the coming months would be a success. He's also said that he was not taken by surprise by the current increase in COVID-19 cases, adding that there was no reason for panic. According to Lauterbach, the current summer wave is an Omicron variant, which is less harmful than the Delta type. Well, using building nails, hammer, and a board, one Nigerian artist is making incredible portraits of people. Well, he says a portrait can take up to 3 months and over 50,000 pieces of nails. Let's take a look.
Hammers and nails are often used for hanging up art pieces. But for one Nigerian artist, these tools make the art itself. The 27-year-old graduate, Odunayo Fakonda from southwest Nigeria, developed his interest in nail art in 2015 when he met someone using nails to make art. He now makes artistic designs and images by hammering hundreds of nails into wood. Today he's completing a portrait of a Nigerian comedian and actor, a piece that used up 55,000 pieces of nails.
I saw somebody back then in 2015 using nail to make art. I love it and I take my time to learn it, and today I can call myself a professional.
Using the pointillist method, he starts by using a pencil to trace out his subject dot by dot on a board, then begins to hammer in the nails until the image begins to form. When done, he sprays in a chemical to avoid the nails from rusting. A portrait can cost from $700 and upwards, and depending on the size of the project, can take up to 3 months to complete. But sometimes it's not without some challenges, as a single mistake may mean starting all over and destroying the board already used.
We have to be very, very technical, because if there's any mistake, it requires us to damage the board. And it won't be nice enough. It will be like a waste of money and waste of time.
Fakwanda has gained fans along the way, many of whom are intrigued by his method to make artwork.
And looking at it far away, I was wondering what it was made of. But by the time I get closer, I could see that there are some, nails coming together and forming, pictures of a whole human being. And I looked at it as, wow, this is wonderful.
Some people do not believe he creates art pieces using nails.
When people get to see my work, they feel wowed. Like, this is different. This is unique. They actually can't really believe something of such exists. Because barely looking at it on phone, they used to see it like pencil work,
Bakponda hopes to inspire younger artists to experiment more and think outside the box when making art.
I'm just blown away by the Nigerian artist, but let's see what you think about this one. It's a new 250-meter-long footbridge across a spectacular canyon in Georgia's Salka region is set to become a magnet for tourists pretty soon. The suspension bridge spans across the Dashbashi Canyon and has a walkway that is partially covered in reinforced glass, offering dizzying views of the bottom of the canyon and the river that flows through it. Not for the feeble-minded, I tell you. A diamond structure at the center of the bridge doubles as a viewing platform and will be the site of a cafe where visitors will be able to sip refreshments as they admire the scenery or order something stronger to calm their nerves. Fearless visitors can even take a ride on a bicycle zip line that runs parallel to the bridge. The construction of the bridge took about 2.5 years and it cost $40 million US. Indeed, not for the feeble-minded, I tell you. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Rumani. See you later.